Welcome. Ted here, Ted at Skipper Scale Models, and welcome to the bench. In this video, it's a little bit different to some of the things that I usually do, whereas I'm going to do some weathering. Now you may say, Ted always does some weathering. Whenever he's at his bench, whatever he's building, he always weathers things. Correct. Yes, I do. But what I'm going to do this time is an unusual subject to come to the bench, but it's one that I thought worthy of filming to show you how it all goes on, because what I'm going to do is weather this gorgeous thing. Look at this, beautiful. This is a class 37 diesel loco. Now I'll tell you a little bit about this. The British Rail class 37, that's this, is a diesel electric locomotive, also known as the English Electric Type 3. The class was ordered as part of a British Rail modernisation plan. They were numbered in two series, the D6600 to D6608 and the D6700 to the D6999. The class became a familiar sight in many parts of the British Rail network, in particular forming the main motive power for the intercity services in East Anglia and within Scotland. Now then, this one here is portrayed in the colours of the West Coast Railway, which is a preservation line set up, and they run trips up and down the country. I think the main operating base is just down the road from me, actually, at Carnforth. That's where you'd see these in this colour. Now then, what we're going to do to weather this is not turn it into an old junker. I'm not turning it into a junkyard scrap loco. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to do some light weathering on it, and because of that I thought it would be an ideal chance to do a little bit of a video just to show you how it all goes together. Now I know many of you are not into locos and railways and things like that, into tanks and aircraft and things like this, but I did used to have a model railway, and this brings back many a happy memory to me. Now I must say the detail since I had a model layout has come on in leaps and bounds. Just look at that. The detail on these things is amazing. They're nicely moulded, they're nicely decaled, a nice paint finish on it, and all I'm going to do this time is do some nice light weathering. I'm just going to weather the running gear up, do some little sort of light airbrushing just along the bottom part of the body, just to give it that look of use, to make it more like the real thing. So what I've done, I've searched around on Google. I found some pictures on the site that I can work to, and we'll do it from that. Yep, so we'll get on with it. Right, well, the first thing I'm going to do is give it a coat of matte varnish, just to make sure that everything that goes on this is nicely matted down, and also the matte will give the pigments, which I'm going to use to do the running gear and that, it give the pigments something to stick to. And the varnish I'm going to use for this is something nice. It's the L-Clad clear coat. It's nice and flat. It's a really nice clear coat for that. And then I'm going to use some, if I can reach over and get them, is a selection of Mig Pigments, medium rust, blacks. I've got some AK exhaust wash that comes in quite nice, some Asphalt road pigments. What else have I got? I've got something else over here as well. Yep, obviously Pigment Fixers, they come in, and some small paint brushes and other things like that. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is take some Tamiya tape, and I'm going to mask off all these windows for the cabs and things like that, because I don't want to fog them up with the clear coat. Right, so I'll go get on with that. I'll mask it all up and give it a coat of matte varnish, and then we'll come back and we'll look at getting some weathering powders on this. It doesn't take long to do this. it's nice and relaxing, something really nice to do. So right, I'll go and admire this loco a little bit longer, then I'll get it to the spray booth. Okay. Right, we're just getting now to the end of masking the windows off on this loco body. Now if I was going to be giving the loco a recoat of paint, I'd be a lot more accurate and take a lot more time in masking the windows off, because I wouldn't want to get any paint or sort of overspray on the windows at all. But as this is really just to protect the windows against a fogging or a light mist of the varnish we'll apply later, it doesn't need to be as accurate just on the edges and such like that. But I still thought I would show you the process of doing the masking anyway. What we're going to need for doing this is some good quality masking tape. As in all the models that I mask off, I use Tamiya. This is a good, fine, really good quality masking tape. It comes in various widths. This is just 2 of the widths that I've got. And I wouldn't suggest that you'd use the ordinary household type masking tape, the blue tape or the frog tape or anything like that, particularly if you're going to spray, because it's really thick. This stuff is really paper thin. It's so thin I can't even find the end of it. There it is. It's really paper thin, and if you're using it for masking off for sort of painting and things like that, it won't leave a great edge on your paint lines. Also, you're gonna need a super sharp knife. This is a Swan Morton. It's got a 10A blade in it and it's brand new. I wouldn't do any more than maybe a full model, even half a model, without putting a new blade in. You can use them again, save them and use again for the rest of your modeling, but when it comes to masking off, cutting the masking tape, you really want it sharp as it can be. A burnishing tool, where I use this, it's a I don't know what it is really. Yeah, it's for sculpting and things in clay and things like that, but I find the end is really useful for burnishing in your tape. Now you can see here just on the driver's cab that I've already started, and I just need to burnish in the edges of the tape very lightly. Burnish it in so that you can see where the fold's going to be, and you need to cut. Now then, this is where the super sharp knife comes in, and I'll probably mess all this up because it's on camera. Just very lightly score along your burnish line, and being super sharp, it will cut straight away. So once you start seeing that your knife is stopping cutting, time to change the blade. And then, if I can find them, some nice needle point tweezers just to pick off that piece. And the same here, if I can see around the camera, just to drag that up there. I think that's done it. I say it's difficult to see because I'm just the other side of the camera here. There. And it's as simple, as easy as that. It can be really fiddly, so what I tend to do, just put some music on in the background, and away we go with the window masking. So there we are. There's that side done anyway, and some of the front, the two ends are done as well. So now we're ready to go across to the spray booth and give it a dusting of the matte varnish that I showed you before, and we'll be back in a moment and we'll do some weathering and apply some pigments. All right, over to the spray booth. Right, we're back at the bench after I've given this a coat of varnish over at the spray booth. It's over there. I've just given it a coat of matte varnish. It's dulled everything down, and it's also provided a nice surface to apply the next stage of weathering to. And to do the weathering, I'm going to use some pigments. Now I'm just going to really be working on the running gear down here. Let's have a pointy stick. I'll just be doing on the running gear down here, and just some of the lower surfaces of the loco body itself. Yeah, as though it's just sort of it's been in a general use, but you know, it's nice and clean, things like that. We don't want to go overboard and make it look like a scrapyard junker or anything like that. So what do we need? Well, first of all, we need the loco itself. I am aware that there are some proper loco type holding type contraptions for holding it. I haven't got that, so I've just improvised by laying it on a nice soft cloth just to protect the bodywork, because it's such a nice engine. Protect the bodywork, and then we can prepare for some weathering. I've also protected the surface because the weathering pigments that we're going to use, they go everywhere, and we don't want to get them around. So what are we going to use? Well, first of all, we'll pick up some of the pigments that we're going to use. I've got this is actually a wash. It's an exhaust coloured wash. Just because it says exhaust doesn't mean to say that it has to be used on exhaust, but it provides a nice browny type, oily type streaking. And I may just use that in some of the places. I may not use it, but I'll have it in my armoury just in case. We've got some Mig medium rust pigments, a nice dark pigment. I don't want anything like a fresh rust or anything like that. Once again, we'll just use this very sparingly, just to pick out one or two points. Then we've got some asphalt road dirt. Once again, I'll keep it in my armoury, but I don't know whether I'll use it because I think it's a little bit too grey. It might be a little bit too light for what I want. I've got some black. Obviously, it'll come in for anything. Could even mix it up with some of the other stuff, the other pigments, just to tone them down a little bit, or use it in itself. Once again, be sparing. We don't want it looking like an old steam engine with coal dust and everything everywhere. And finally, one of the things that I will think I'll use this. It's dark earth. It's a Mig pigment again. It's nice colour. I think when it goes on, it'll look just right. It's sort of picked up the ballast type dust, and also some of the trackside type dirts and things like that. But it'll go on. And to fix it all, Pigment Fixer. I use this. I know that people out there will talk about using ordinary thinners and other things like that, some Tamiya paint thinners or white spirits, things like that. I find, yes, you can use them, but those type of fixers don't tend to hold the pigments as hard as this stuff does. Some of them water the pigment down, it becomes like a sloppy mess. Some of them you can, when it dries off, you can rub the pigments off, but using the proper pigment fixer sort of really bonds it to the model, whatever you're doing. We'll need a selection of brushes. Certainly you'll need an old brush, if I can find an old brush. There it is. Yeah, an old stubby brush just for applying the pigments. A bigger brush just for brushing it all off again. One or two little finer brushes. Certainly I'll be using a fine brush like this just to apply the pigment fixer and get everything fixed. And of course, as well as the protection on the bench, need some gloves, because this stuff will go everywhere. All right, let's have a start. Let's get zoomed in so you can see a little bit, and then we'll get on with applying some pigments and do some weathering on this. Right, let's get sorted. Right, so we're all suited up, ready to go. Right, the first thing we're going to do is work on this piece of the running gear. First of all, use some pigment fixer and a small brush, and have your other brush ready, your tatty old pigment applying brush, and take the top off take the top off the pigment, but be careful you don't knock it over. Right, so here we go. What we're going to do first is we'll work on a small section at a time. At the start of this piece of the chassis here, we'll apply some Pigment Fixer, and then immediately on top of that we'll take our brush, just load it up with some of the pigment and just slap it on there. A bit more. Now that probably does look like we've applied a little bit too much, but don't worry, it will brush off. That's where the other big brush comes in, just to brush it off. And you can see now where the Pigment Fixer has picked it up in all the nooks and crannies and has held on to it. And then just moving back a little bit more. Oops, sorry, wrong brush. That's what you've got to take your care of. This is the Pigment Fixer going back. We'll work along at just a small section at a time. Just blow it on, let it run, and then picking up the right brush and the pigment, we can apply some more in there. Obviously I'm trying to apply it sparingly because I don't want it going in all the pickups and everything inside, but it can be cleaned off later using some spirits or IPA, some alcohol cleaner, things like that. And we can see now, if I get my little pointy stick again, we can see now how it's taking some effect on the suspension springs. You must excuse my non-knowledge of railway locos, but yeah, these springs here, how it picks it up. That's where just put the tops back on a minute. Excuse back on. Put the tops back on a minute, and we can then look at some this wash that we spoke about before. Give it a good shake, because really this is pigments really thin down in an enamel carrier. So this will work with your pigments as well. So I don't know if you can really see in there, it's all gungy and thick. Just pick some up on the brush, dab it off on your cloth a little bit, and then we can go over those sprigs again and we give them like an oily type texture, but this will dry. It won't remain oily, it will look as such. And we can drag it down, just applying it just ever so sparingly. You can always put more on and see how already, I don't know if you can zoom in anymore. No, I can't. You can see already how it's taking effect. Now all you've got to do is work across the part that you want to weather, just a bit at a time. There's no rush to do this. I say these yellow bits here, see how that one has already changed colour. It's dark, it's toned it down a little bit. Makes it look a bit more grubbier than these here, which are looking bright and stark. So that we can touch those again with some Pigment Fixer. Put the top back on, even for a moment, because you'll knock it over. In again to the pigment, just take the excess off. As I say, this colour that I've chose, this dark earth, yeah, because it says dark earth doesn't mean to say that you can't use it in this particular application. It's just a reference colour. It's what colours you think go best. Now then, before we move too far along, what we want to do is make sure that this bit over here, we don't lose it. So back to the pigment fixer, and this is where it will really stick. Now this pigment fixer won't alter the colour or the texture of the pigment, unlike when perhaps you use another thinner, a generic thinner that will sometimes move the fixer. All we're doing here is just touching it and let the capillary action take the fixer across where we've applied all the pigment. Now just try and move it about a little bit there to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's very subtle. As I say, we don't want this loco looking like a junkyard scrapper, but we can apply just enough to make it look like it's been used. Back, getting the brush and the pots mixed up again, back to the pigment fixer. We can work a little bit towards this end now. We've done some in there, and we can do these suspension springs as well. Put some pigment fixer on those. Then we can go in again with the pigments. There we go. So that's it for the running gear. There's obviously the next set to do here as well, and then we can turn it over and do the other side. So rather than you watch me do all of that, we can leap forward in with the magic of technology. Just put some pigment fixer on these as well at the back. So with the magic of technology, we'll change scenes, and when you come back, this will all be done and ready for looking at each end. We'll look at the ends of the loco, and doing a little bit of a different sort of, well, not different, but a little bit more work on them. Right, so I'll carry on with this, and we'll come back and we'll move on to the next stage, but at the quick of a change of scene. Okay. Alright, so we've done the running gear, and it's time to bring our attention, oops, wobbly camera, it's time to bring our attention to the front and backs of the engine. We're going to work on this end with the detail of the little bit of a plough on the front, and first of all what we're going to do is we'll find our exhaust wash, because I think this is pretty good colour to start with, and it will pick out some of the detail and also let us get on, and when necessary we'll apply some pigments as well. Now this is a bit of a random type thing with no specific sort of planning in effect. We'll just put it on and see how it goes, because it usually works out pretty well, and if you don't like it you could always take it off with some thinners. What we're going to do here, because it's a wash, we can sort of splash it on, slap it on, and do the buffers as well, because we can rub a bit of that off behind the buffers along with red, and then we can take a wide brush and just work it about. Now you see up here it's already pulling itself up and giving us a nice effect on that. That's a little bit too much, so find a cotton bud, and we could just work it back. There, we're getting the effect already. Just rub some of that off on the buffers. These are dark buffers already. I know that on some locos they're quite silver, and they could do with a bit of toning down a little bit, but these are not too bad. In fact, we could actually put some silver around the centres just to show a bit of contact wear. And we can already see here, just by, let's clean the brush off a little bit, just by working it in, that it gives us, where's my cotton bud gun again. Just by working it around, we can find a nice effect for it. Looking as though some muck has been sprayed up. I'm working across the top here. Now we can put some of this just in the creases of the plough. And taking a softer brush, a round brush, we can work it back. Or cut this back. Don't worry, we'll work on this in a minute. And because our running gear has the dark earth on it, we could actually just colour this in the same sort of, we're not putting it on thick like we were last time, we can colour it in, but we'll put some chips on this. See how this detail in here, now the exhaust wash is drying, it's leaving a nice sort of toned down effect. The shine's gone off it. Just continue to work. Now then, we can touch that in with some medium rust. Not too much of this. In fact, we can just find a nice sharp brush, and this will, it's subtle, don't put it on too thickly, just touch it. What we're doing here, rather than building up layers and layers of mounds of dirt, we're just colouring the area and leaving a tone that, so when we spray it, it will actually just leave a colour and a hint of a little bit of rust. Unfortunately, I don't think the camera is actually picking this up, but it's there. Now, we wanted this subtle. As I say, we don't want to look like a junkyard dog. Now, what we could do here is with some old rust metallic acrylic paint, just give us a second just to shake it up, and we'll do some chipping. I'm just trying to find a nice brush in the rack, nice point on it. Because I'm sure this cow catcher plough will take some hammer, even if it's just from thrown up bits of ballast and things like that. Chipping ever so tiny amount on your brush, and just touch on the edges. To try and adjust the lighting so you can see. Don't try and do too much at once. What you want to do when you come to chipping, if you are doing other things like a tank or things like that, start with tiny chips and then make that chip bigger. Don't start with a big chip. Random. Just make the chip bigger rather than trying a big chip just at once. That's all I'm using, just that little bit of paint down here. Because I zoomed in, you can't really see everything that's on the bench. But we're not going to do too much. We could even do some dry brushing on this. Just a touch up here, just a hint around the light of maybe a bit of wear on the paintwork, something of the paint shop to come and touch up, and we could even do some around the edges of the buffer like that. See how it's not, we don't need a lot, it just gives a hint, especially in this scale. When this acrylic dries, once again it dries down to a nice matte. See the effect it's having in here now the paint's drying. And it just looks like the paint is beginning to be chipped off, and that work we did with the acrylics, just with the pigments, just gives it that impression now of where the paint's thin but the rust and the metal hasn't actually come through, it's only just taking effect on the edges. Right, that's all we're going to do with that. Clear the brush, clean all the brushes up later on with some brush cleaner. Always look after your brushes. Can we get that in? Where is it? The Master's brush cleaner. Yep. Always at the end of the day, finish your brushes off, clean your brushes up. Where are we now? Let's have a look. Do some black. Once again, we're not building this up like we were on the running gear. We're just gonna work some colour in. Just round the top here. And then brush it off before we get too much on. What I could do, I just had a thought, what I could do, I've got another box of stuff somewhere. Let's go find it and we'll try this. Here it is. It's another wash, US Modern Vehicles wash. As I say, just because things are labelled as such, you don't need to use them on US Modern Vehicles. It's a nice darky brown colour. What we could do with this is we could give the front here just a wash, just a touch and a streak, come down into the yellow, that's all we need of that. And now a nice round brush and just pull it, no, the wrong brush, try this flat one. Work it down, pull that off again. Could probably have done with the wash going on before the black pigment, but it's working. Got that look of a rain, where the rain has dragged down on the vehicle, on a loco. I think that's a little bit thick, that. I'll just get some thinner just to clean that off a little bit. See what I mean? How you can start again. Just use some thinner. I've used some IPA, some isopropyl alcohol IPA. Just cleans it off nicely. And then we could do it again. And play around with it. Because you've put the matte varnish on, it's given a protection of your undercoat. There we go. Just a matter of working it until you feel you've done enough. But the idea is, an idea for when you're weathering is when you think you've done enough, leave it, go away, and then come back the next day and have a look at it then. So I think we'll go back just to touch this black in a bit more. But I think that there is about all we're going to do on this. think we'll leave the front just a touch thinner, just to thin that bit out there. I think that's a little bit too big. Using the brush, it pulls the wash down and gives it a natural effect of a run. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So that you see there how you can, with a little bit thinner, a little bit of alcohol cleaner, you could just clean it off. Have a look around. Yeah, it's in a little bit of a box. As I say, there are proper purpose-made holders for locos and carriages for painting and repairing and things like that, but I don't have one because I don't do many, if any, locos. So I haven't got one, but you never know, I might do a few more of these. I'm quite enjoying this, and just picking up some of the edges on this with just some black pigment. That's all. Let's see how it's changed the tone. It gives the impression that there's something there now, rather than painting it. Right, so I'm going to leave this now. I'm going to leave it, as I say, overnight. I'll come back to it tomorrow and have a look. But if I'm happy with it tomorrow, I shall give it a final spray coat, just to give it some dust, just some escaped pigments just on the side, but we could just brush them off. But right, that's it until tomorrow. I'll come back. It'll be tomorrow for me, but it'll be a few minutes, a few seconds even, in the video. Right, back to the spray bench when this is finished. See you in a moment. Right, we've come to the sort of the final stage of this weathering. We're going to apply some a dust wash just to the lower section of the loco body, as I say. And for this, I'm using something I wouldn't normally use. I'm using Humbrol dust wash. I find it's an easy product to use. It does what it says on the tin, and it gives me a nice sort of light misting, just where and how I need it. I'm using my Harder and Steenbeck airbrush with a 0.4 needle. The air pressure's round about 20 psi. It's a nice light dusting, and to help me do this, I don't want to cover the whole sorry, just banging the camera there. I don't want to cover the whole of the body, so I'm just going to use some. Now this is probably going to hide everything, but I'm going to use just a little bit of paper just to dust the bottom of the body and not get everything everywhere. As you can see now, we are in the spray booth. I haven't turned it on just yet. I'll turn it on in a moment when I get into the rest of it, because I just want to explain what's going on, and then we can do round. Now you see already, just with a really light coat, it gives us that dust type effect. Now what I'm going to do, I'll turn the air booth on, the spray booth on. It'll get a little bit noisy, and perhaps even my compressor might kick in, but I might, if it gets too noisy, I'll just change the sound for a little bit of music while we carry on with this. Alright, let's get on with this. It doesn't take too long, so we'll turn that on. And that, everybody, is about as much as I'm going to do. As I say, it doesn't need a lot. It just needs that hint and a light dusting just to work its way up the body, and that's it. I think, oh, I missed a little bit. I think we could just do some on these boxes here. There, that's better. That sort of evens it up a little bit. Oops, knocking the camera. It's rather difficult trying to spray and get everything in with the camera. Right, I apologise for the bouncy camera, but that is about it. All I'm going to do now is just let that dry. Give it a coat of varnish again, just to finish everything off and firm everything down. So I'll give it a spray varnish, take the masking off the windows, and we're done. Right, let's go and have a roundup. And that's it, the finished result. The class 37 tractor is now complete. As I said right from the start, it was only going to be a light weathering, just to show it being in light service. It wasn't ever going to be a junkyard scrapper, but something of a representation of the West Coast Railways. A machine that goes about its business, and then at the end of the day gets a nice wash down and a clean, and ready for the next outing of passengers. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this little video. It's something a little bit different for me, but don't forget, if down here somewhere, if you're watching on a laptop or something, you'll find a little subscribe button if you want to subscribe to Skipper Scale Models and have a look. And also the little notification bell, I think that's just down here. If you click that as well, you'll get notifications of when I put a next video up. It's been the first time I've done some locos, and I don't think it's going to be the last. I've got one or two trucks and things lying around. I might have a go at weathering those up in the future, so if you're into railways, keep an eye out. If you're not into railways, come along and have a look on the channel for all the other things that I do as well. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, thanks for dropping in, and don't forget, like, subscribe and tell your friends. Bye now.